Is this thing on? Welcome back to Big Mouth, and fancy seeing you here in June. A very welcome, my friends, and especially my enemies. Come in, sit down, no touching. I don't do the touching. Are you feeling charitable? If you are, smash the subscribe button and the like button, and please do follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Friday's edition of the dceu Daily. And today we are continuing our Heroes of the dceu series. Today's part 2. Last time we did Wonder Woman. Today we are really going to deal with a really touchy subject. The dceu Superman, played by Henry Cavill. So we saw the vision of Nolan, Goya and Snyder for Man of Steel. We saw the continued vision of Zack Snyder and Chris Terrio in BVS. Now, it's very interesting and probably not a very popular opinion, an unpopular opinion, which the internet is full of course. Man of Steel Superman is actually really different to BVS's Superman. You don't agree? You don't agree? I think that Cavill's Superman is there are some elements that you can kind of link in with the comic book Superman. There's elements of a brighter Superman. He even smiles now and again. He cracks some jokes, right? Even though it's a darker take than what we're used to. I want to be clear. I love Superman in BVS and MOS, but I'm just trying to give you my forthright opinion why there is a divisive nature with this character within the DCEU. Because I think in Man of Steel, even though it's making big commentary on the world we live in and on humanity and how we're trying to find life on other planets, because our planet is, let's be honest, dying. This is exactly what Zod and the Kryptonians are attempting to do on Earth, right? But the Man of Steel Superman, I believe at least, is more of there's a balance to him. Yes, there's that darker element of him killing Zod, which we'll get to a bit later on. But when you compare him, and also it's very interesting to me, because when you get to the end of Man of Steel, there's a lot of levity there. I mean, we have to remember, the scene before, he's broken Zod's neck, right? And then he goes to see his mother. It's a very light and loving moment. I love that moment when they remember when he was a kid and Jonathan's watching him with the cape on. It's a brilliant sequence. But it's very lighter in tone than the scene of Superman breaking Zod's neck. And also, of course, you've got the scene with, I think he's kind of hot, which is supposed to be levity there, which is good levity. I like it. A lot of people don't like that scene, but I really do. I think it's okay. And then he goes to the Daily Planet as an employee for the first time. You know, he's explained that voiceover of him talking to Martha saying, I have to go somewhere where I know where everything's going on in the world. He puts on the glasses. He's introduced to Lois officially, kind of thing. He meets Perry White played by the iconic Lawrence Fishburne. There's a big welcome to the planet, and he smiles. It's all very Donner type, really, isn't it? If you think about it. Even that was controversial, that Clark Kent in the Daily Planet didn't happen to the very last scene. Again, they were trying to do something different, and I respect that, and I haven't got an issue with it. So we go from Welcome to the Planet, and he nods his head, and it's fine, and it's kind of very Donner and Reeve. It is. If you like it or not, that moment is very Donner and Reeve. So we go to BVS, and all of a sudden we've got Batman's origin story, very dark, which you would expect. That's cool. I like Superman dark. Sorry, I like Batman dark. Don't quote me on the other one, right? But Batman should be dark, really. He can lighten up now and again, but he is a dark character with a dark past. So him being dark, absolutely no issue. This is about Superman, by the way, not Batman. So then we go in the middle, I think it's the Middle East, when he's accused of killing the soldiers he's stitched up by Lex. And there's a great scene, actually, when he rescues Lois. And just by Cavill's acting from his eyes, you know that guy's for it. You're for it now. You're messing with my girl, and he just, boom, the way Snyder directs her, that's brilliant. So I like that. Then all of a sudden we're going to the trials, and the mood and the tone is very somber. Again, I get it. I like it. I don't dislike it. What I'm trying to say here is it's very weird how Man of Steel ends in a very kind of light, comedic way, if you like, very friendly. You're ready for the new adventures, even though he still really hasn't learned how to be Superman. He hasn't gone into the fortress. I know Jor-El's kind of spoken to him in the spaceship in Man of Steel, and he's learned some things, but he hasn't had his training yet. There's not even any mention of training. He's not really ready to take on this mantle. So I don't know what Snyder's plan was by the end. Would we get a fortress? Was the spaceship actually the fortress? A lot of people think that. I think that. Look, I don't mind new ideas. Smallville was a very controversial show because it came up with new ideas and new ways of telling the Superman story, and some people never accepted that. Like Lex Luthor being in Smallville and being friends with Clark, but I think that went to such a great dark place, it really worked for me. So there's some things, most things I say, this is a new creative, he's looking at things differently, that's fine. It's like when the spaceship takes the baby cow to Earth and we see it, flying towards the Kents, right, and we don't see him growing up and it's all kind of flashbacks. I'm okay with that. At first it was kind of shocking, but I got used to it after a few viewings, and that's okay. But I do feel that Superman in the DCEU needs a Fortress of Solitude. So that's one thing that I will not agree with Zack Snyder with. As much as I respect him and like him, it shouldn't be the spaceship that's the fortress. I want to see the ice rise up, just like Superman the movie. And Smallville, Season 5, Episode 1, amazing. The Fortress of Solitude is a very important aspect in Superman's heritage, in Superman lore. And I don't see why there's any good reason not to have it, not to see the ice rise up and the crystals rise up. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful setting. And it's not like they didn't have the budget to do it. So I respect that Zack was doing something different and Chris and David were doing something different. Also, one of the talking points we had with Man of Steel, of course, no kryptonite. We didn't see any sign of kryptonite till BVS. Now, David S. Goyer said, oh, well, who wants to see that? That's stupid. Kryptonite's dumb. Kryptonite's done this screen thing that can make him weak. No, David, this is why you don't understand Superman. And I know you've got some history with comic books, but at the end of the day, Superman's so powered, right, overpowered and strong, and kryptonite makes him weak. It's the one thing that can be used to weaken him. Kryptonite is very, very important. You can weaken Superman emotionally when he's in love or when his heart's broken or when he's been betrayed. That's great. I think, and that, if I go back to Smallville and bore you about Smallville again, not only was Smallville great because when Clark was dealing with emotional issues, that could weaken him as a character and as a person, but also the kryptonite being all over Smallville, right, was very important. They made kryptonite a character within this Superman universe, and that was great. So every time a meteor-infected character was fighting him, they were on an even level with him, which was great. And this is why kryptonite is actually very important. So I don't think it's a big deal that kryptonite isn't featured in Man of Steel, even though I would have liked to have seen it. I think to say, oh, it's just stupid. David, kryptonite is very important. And these are a couple of things, the Fortress and kryptonite not being involved. I'm thinking, nah, these are little things. Well, no, I think the Fortress of Solitude is a very, very important thing. Now, we have to look and we have to see as a character, is this a good Superman? In Man of Steel, I think he's a great Superman. We meet him when he's working and traveling and trying to find out a bit more about the world. Right, it's an interesting concept. I like seeing Clark like that. And then he travels full circle. He goes back to see his mom, as you Americans call it, right? And then slowly, he's trying to investigate his origin. So he finds out that there's things going on in the Arctic. So he gets a job there, and that's how he first meets Lois Lane. How he first meets Lois Lane is amazing. Then he finds the ship. Then he sees Jor-El's false ghost, and he finds out who he is. And then he puts the costume on. Now, a lot of people, and at the time I probably thought, this is a bit quick. It's not quick in terms of the length that we've waited to see that, because you've probably had about 40 minutes at least. It's just like he's got a beard. He comes out in the costume, looks terrific, right? But what happened to the beard? I mean, it could have easily been, there's a Kryptonian way of dealing with this, of course. And again, not a big deal. I don't think it was the fact that it was too quick. It's just when he comes out, it's wow, he's wearing the costume already. There's no doubt in this guy's mind. He's seen the costume. He's spoken to Jor-El's false ghost, and he's just put that thing on. No doubt, no questions. Well, maybe I would have liked, I'm not sure about this, Jor-El or whoever you are. I don't even know if you're really my dad. Should I be putting this on? He should take a step back, then put it on. Again, that's a minor gripe. I want you to know I love Zack Snyder's DCEU. I'm just talking out loud. I know you're going to downvote the hell out of me. I'm just giving you my honest opinions, right? But the sequence when he comes out with the costume, tries to fly, and he's laughing as he's flying, then he falls down because he loses concentration, then he kneels down and hears his father's voice, and he closes his eyes like a god and then flies. That is one of the most beautiful moments, not just Superman moments of all time. Snyder nails it, and so does Cavill. Don't tell me Snyder can't get great performances out of his actor, because he does there and he does throughout that movie. Cavill as Superman in Man of Steel is fantastic. It is a great performance. And when he breaks Zod's neck and he screams, wow, what great acting by Henry Cavill. So then we get to that moment when he breaks Zod's neck. There's no question within the story. We've had this discussion a million times. We're going to have it again. There's no question within the story he has no choice but to do this. The issue here is that David S. Goyer decides to put him in this position. Even Chris Nolan said to him, David, are you sure about this? Superman killing. I'm not just thinking that people have a problem with Superman killing, right? Because I know people try and come up with this bullshit that he killed the Kryptonian villains in the Fortresses Superman 2, which he didn't. It was done what they did. They just slid down the bottom of it. I'm sure there's a little Kryptonian prison at the bottom there or something. We'll never know what happened. But we didn't see Superman kill them. It's as simple as that. So you can't use that as a defense. Maybe Superman's killed in the comics before. I don't know. I don't have a greater knowledge of the comics to tell you that. But the point is that David puts him in this position. Now, should he have put Superman in a position to have no choice but to kill? Here's the thing. I thought in the sequel to this film, which eventually was BVS, I thought we were going to hear like lines from Cavill saying, I've killed before. I know how that feels. I never want to feel that way before. Again, I've killed once. It felt terrible taking a life, especially one of my own people. It made me the last person, the last Kryptonian, the last son of Krypton. I never want to feel how it feels to kill again. That's why I thought David did it for the first film. Superman has this no-kill policy, which is great, and I love him for, and always loved him for. But why? Unless he knows what it's like to kill, and it destroyed him inside, then there was a good reason to do it. But in BVS, we never had any narrative or any commentary like that. And for me, simply, that's a mistake. Because if you're going to get a character that basically never killed before, right, give or take some contrived excuses, right, you've got to have a good reason for him killing. Now, yes, he's got no choice. He's killed. But in the writer's mind, there's got to be, I am going to commentate on this again in the next movie. And he didn't. I wanted to see that. It would have been great when he fights Batman and maybe he's got a chance to kill Batman. He says, I know what it's like to kill. I killed someone, one of my own people. As I said, it made me the last son of Krypton. I never want to feel that way again. If he says that to Batman, he has that chance. Imagine it, right? Instead of the Martha bit, right? He goes, so basically I'll repeat what I've just said. He's got a chance to kill Batman. I've killed before. I killed one of my own people that made me the last son of Krypton. I never want to feel like that again. And that speech stops Batman and stops Superman from fighting. Superman pulls him up. And Superman says, I had no choice but to come here. Lex was blackmailing me. He's got my mother. And then they go off and they save Martha, right? And they do everything else. That would have worked, right? That would have been a powerful moment because it actually makes commentary from a controversial moment from the first film. Now, I like the Martha thing. I'm not saying that. But I think the problem with the Martha moment is most people don't get it apart from us lot, right? And I think that's the problem. it was a risky thing to do. So people are saying, oh my God, they stopped fighting because they got a mother of the same name. It's obvious to anyone people are going to make a joke out of this, right? But they didn't see it. They just saw some really deep cuts here. And I respect them for that. Don't get me wrong. But I think Superman having the chance to kill Batman and saying, listen, I know what it's like to kill. I don't want to feel that way before. And it stops them from fighting. That's a much better way of doing it. It compels the audience. Now, if you're asking me if BVS should have ever happened, I love BVS. But in terms of a franchise doing that before you give Batman a standalone movie, risky. But they were in a rush. Again, Zack was given what they wanted, right? They said we wanted a Batman and Superman team up, and he did it the way he wanted to do it. And it was controversial, and it's one of the most controversial films of all time. I think the only other controversial film that's had so much commentary with it is Oliver Stone's JFK, one of my favourite films of all time, because it makes a big statement on how Kennedy was killed. Big statement. And some people, especially right-wingers, didn't want to accept that. So that's the only other controversial film that's had so many talking points. I mean, even Costner and Stone had death threats when they were making that film. I remember that back in early 1990. That film was released in 91, 92. So there's that. So we can go into that, but there's no point really because we're talking about Superman. So ultimately, right, I love the whole thing of Superman sacrificing his life. I've got no problem with that. The problem is a lot of the audience believe the death of Superman came too soon because they feel they didn't know him. Even though I think that's rat's rot, right? That's a new term, rat's rot. I don't agree with that. I felt it. But maybe a death of Superman story, basically more loyally done from the death of Superman comics later on within the franchise, probably would have been a better idea. So the BVS Superman is so different than a Man of Steel Superman. He's so darker, he's so more brooding. It is a deconstruction. And I think if this was kind of the first film, you could kind of understand deconstructing him, then reconstructing him at the end. That makes sense in an origin story. I think that a lot of people just didn't get what was going on here. And I can understand that, even though I love BVS and MOS. I'm just looking at it from the other side. So if I'm honest, I prefer Superman from Man of Steel to BVS. I like what Cavill did. I like what Snyder and Terrio did. It was a deconstruction. It was an interesting deconstruction. But as Marty McFly says in Back to the Future 1, that's a great... it goes, obviously, you're not ready for this yet. But I bet your kids are going to love it. And that's how I feel about BVS. Our kids are going to love that film. Love that film. You guys just weren't ready for it. And I think in terms of Superman, you know, when you've got a whole movie of Superman, people may think that he was wasted in that film. We may not agree with that, but you've got to look to everyone. And then the last time we saw him was, of course, and I don't want to talk about Shazam because we didn't really see Cavill's Superman. We saw him in Justice League. Now, there's no point talking about the Superman in the Snyder Cut. There's Zack Snyder's Justice League. Let's talk about Justice League and what he's like in that film. I like the fact he fights the League. I think that's interesting. I think Cavill nails it. I like him being kind of Lois being the reason he stops fighting them. Unfortunately, that film has a problem with Superman, and it's the execution. The upper lip CGI, how terrible Cavill's face looks. But if you take all of that away, I think he's all right in Justice League. He's not brilliant. Man of Steel is still the Don, right? It's still the Don of Cavill's and the DCEU Superman. That's where he works the most. You've got Snyder's direction, and you've got Nolan and Goya's writing. It's a perfect symphony, and it absolutely works. But the second film, maybe they did go a little bit too brooding and deconstructive with Superman, even though I liked what they did and I enjoyed the film. And in Justice League, I love it when Cavill is with the other Justice League members, and it really works. Even though there's production problems and there's issues of execution, I think the stuff they did would have been pretty cool if it was done properly. So ultimately, I love Cavill's Superman, but there are inconsistencies there, and it's a shame. But I still want to see more. And I know that you want to see more, and I want you to comment down below. Like, share and subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter. And I will be back tomorrow with more DCEU Daily. See you again soon. It's been great.